Mayor, so we are looking really good here with these measurements. This moves us to the third and final step of the design, where essentially we're just going to ask you to double check these measurements, right? Sort of measure twice and cut once. So everything's looking quite good. There's, I think, just one or two things that I want to highlight. And again, essentially, we're just going to ask you to double check these. So for most of our riders, that just means a trip to the garage. In this case, unfortunately, a trip back to the dealerships, but I appreciate you bearing with us. We do this as a measure twice because it really tightens everything up, make sure that everything is going to mount right, and of course, a little bit of extra discomfort on the front end is worth a whole lot of aggravation later on, right? So, okay, what you're seeing here is the side-to-side measurements are the same as what you provided. The front-back measurements have changed, so I'm going to explain that. The first thing, though, I want to point out, don't worry about the photo overlay at all. We know that this top view photo is actually different, right? We pulled that from some stock photos. And the side view, there's a little bit of angle and everything. These photos never ever line up perfectly, not even the very best of them. So don't worry about that. They're just there so that I can point at things and describe them and you understand me. Okay, so front back measurements have changed. Here's what's happening. Your measurement number 1 went to the rider's back when you were seated in the normal riding position. So now what we do is we move back 8 centimeters from your back, and that's where we put the front of the metal frame of the cockpit. Once it's cushioned and upholstered, you'll lose some of that space, and so it keeps it far enough back that it won't obstruct you when you're riding. It won't be a nuisance. It won't be a little bit of a backrest, so you don't get that pleasure, but we really want to keep it far enough back that it won't bother you. So the first thing you're going to do is be seated once again in the normal riding position. You'll measure back 8 centimeters, mark that spot on the motorcycle. That will be the new reference point for checking these front back measurements. So let's get right into it. We have the central bolt, right, that's a bit to the rear here. This is the one that holds the passenger seat in place if you're using it. That's going to be 35.5 centimeters from the front of the cockpit. We have the rear brackets, right, 26 centimeters side to side and located 23 centimeters from the front of the cockpit. Looks good. And then we have the front lateral brackets, 27 side to side and located 11 from the front of the cockpit. Okay, so all that's looking good. We're just going to check it. You know, if anything needs to be adjusted, let me know, but looking good. Okay, now we have the vertical measurements, right? And so for the front brackets, we have 14 centimeters. Looks good. Now the rear one, I had a little bit of confusion here. Let's just to clarify, this is why we're doing it, measure twice. So we had measurement 8 and measurement 7, and we had 14 and we had 29. So 7, we probably got a little bit confused in what we were describing there, okay? Because clearly 7 and 8 are very similar. So sometimes it's a typo that we see, sometimes, just a goof. I mean, this could be 14 and 19. Anyway, I absolutely avoid guessing because that's where, problems occur. So we're just going to double check this. And let me bring this back over. Where were we? Here we are. Okay, so that's where I've just called this measurement A, okay, to just to avoid confusion. So we have 14 for the first one. We have A for the rear one. And what you're seeing here is we're going to do this as a V shape. And that provides support straight up. It also puts some of that support to the rear, okay? Keep in mind the purpose here is to rest the bottom of the cockpit on the wheel hub. So if the dealership model or anything has a passenger seat, we want to remove it. The whole idea here is that this will be a full bottom cockpit, and it will rest just on top of the wheel hub, okay? So make sure that those vertical measurements account for that. Again, this never lines up nicely on the photos, but when there's some gap like this, I just kind of reinforce that we're on the same page. The bottom of the cockpit is this seesaw level at the top of the wheel hub. So you're going to put a piece of plywood or some sort of board, something that they'll have there at the dealership that's going to be flat. It's going to rest on that wheel hub, and that's what you're measuring up to, right? Okay, so again, 14 for the front, and then we are going to fill in the blank here on A for the rear. Now, this one back here, yes, there was some distance, some vertical distance, but generally we're just using it as an additional anchor point, so I'm not really, there's not really the idea for a bracket here so much as the opportunity to run a bolt through it, okay? This is really what's going to lock us in place in combination with resting on top of the wheel hub. Again, the seesaw sort of idea is what we're talking about. Probably the most apt way to visualize it. Okay, so how do you tell me what needs to be changed or revised? Really simple. In the notes field of the review form, you're just going to write the original measurement equals the new measurement. So don't go back to our measurements markup. We're all done with that. There's no more measurement 1, 2, 3, 4. We're simply going to take what we see here, and we're going to write old equals new, x equals y. So maybe 35.5 equals, 36, whatever. 23 equals 23.5. A equals whatever. That's the idea. I'm going to take those measurements. Any revisions, I will put them into the build diagram, and then that'll hopefully give us something that we're ready to approve and can move right into the build. Okay, so that was for the Nightster, right? We're going to move on in the separate video to the Scout, and with that one, we'll also talk about the sizing, which you're going to see in that build diagram.